All right, so today we're going to look at arithmetic, sequence, and series. Um, yes, I know this really says arithmetic, but it is pronounced arithmetic when you're talking about sequence and series. So if I give you this list of numbers and I tell you to find the next number, so you have to first look for a pattern. So it looks like we're going from 3 to 7, 7 to 11, 11 to 15, blah, blah, blah. Looks like we are adding 4 every time. So when you have a list of numbers that has a pattern like that, that is what a sequence is. So a sequence, it is just a fancy way of saying a list of numbers like this. So now if you notice, we're adding 4 to this every time. So this is plus 4, plus 4, plus 4, yada, yada. That is the arithmetic part. So arithmetic means that you are adding the same number. Oops. So arithmetic means you're adding the same number. So we're adding 4 every time. A sequence is just a list of numbers. So that's all you need to know for that part. So now a series is you need to find the sum of a list of numbers. My dog is just driving me crazy right now. Find a sum of a list of numbers. So let's pretend, actually I'll tell you the formula first. So here's the formula. You take the first number, you add it to your last number, you divide it by 2, and then you multiply it by your number of numbers. Okay, so here's an example. Find the sum of the first 10 numbers of this. So let's just go ahead. So we have 3, 7, 11, 15. Keep adding 4 every time. So you have 19, 23, 27, 4, 31, 35. How many am I at? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10 is 39. Okay, so what we do, we're just going to use this formula. So you take your first number is 3. You add the last number, so plus 39. You divide it by 2, and then you multiply by your number of numbers. So if you're finding the sum of the first 10 numbers, then we're going to have 10 numbers. So if you put that into your calculator, 3 plus 39 divided by 2 times 10, you get 210. So this equals 210. So if I were to add all of these numbers together, I'd get 210. So some of you are probably thinking, well, I would have probably just taken 3 plus 7 plus 11 plus 15 plus 19 and put all of these into your calculator. Great, you can probably do that until you get to something where it's like, find the first 30 numbers or find the sum of the first 100 numbers. You're not going to want to do that, and that's why we need the formula. So now we're doing the same thing, but now we're finding the sum of the first 30 numbers. Okay, so to use this formula, you have to have your first number and your last number. So our first number is obviously 3, but we have to find the last number. So I personally do not want to have to list out all 30 numbers. So this is what I think is the trickiest part of what you're going to be learning. So to find the last number, you have to write your linear equation. So you have to write it in y equals mx plus b form. So don't forget, b is what you start with. So we're starting with 3, so plus 3. M is what you're adding every time, so we're adding 4 every time. So we're going to write this equation. So I'm going to make a little table here. Okay, so if I plug in a 0 here, if I plug in 0, 4 times 0 plus 3, that gives me, so let's call this x and y. If I plug in 0, I get 3. Okay, what if I plug in 1? So 4 times 1 is 4 plus 3. Oh, I do not hide that. You don't need to see that. Okay, 4 times 1 is 1 plus 3 is 7. So if I plug in a 1, I get a 7. What if I plug in 2? Well, 4 times 2 is 8 plus 3, that's 11. So now if you notice, if you look up here, those are our first numbers. So this is our first number. This is our second number. This is our third number. So if you notice, if I plug in a 0 to this, I get my first number. If I plug in a 1, I get my second number. If I plug in a 2, I get my third number. We want the 30th number. So if I extend this, if I want my 30th number, what number do I have to plug in for x? Well, if you notice, this is just 1 less than the number you want. So if I plugged in a 0, I got my first. If I plug in a 1, I got my second. So to get my 30th number, I need to plug in 29. So I'll go over to the side here. So y equals, oh boy, running out of room. Y equals 4 times 29 plus 3. So if I put that into my calculator, 4 times 29 plus 3, you get 119. So this equals 119. So that is going to be my last number. And then to solve, so now we actually have to find the sum. So we take our first number is 3, add it to our last number, which is 119. We're going to divide it by 2, and then you multiply by 10. So 3 plus 119 divided by 2 times 10 gives you 610. Okay, so we're going to look at a couple examples. Here's our first one. Find the sum of the first 100 terms. So this one, good luck doing this without the formula because it would take you forever. Okay, so our first number is 2. We need to find the last number. So to find the last number, you need to write out your y equals equation. So y equals, it looks like we are going up by, so plus 5, plus 5, plus 5. So we're going up by 5. So we're going to do 5x. And we started at 2, so plus 2. Okay, so we want the 100th. So I'm going to make my little table. So if this was x, this is y. This is your term, I guess. Okay, so if I plug in a 0 to this, so if I put in a 0 here, 5 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. If I plug in a 1, I get 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2, that's 7. If I plug in a 2, I'm probably going to get 12. If I plug in a 3, I'm going to get 17, and so on. But we, okay, so if you look, 2 was our first term, 7 was our second term, and so on. Okay, so we want our 100th term. So I want my 100th term. So if I plugged in a 0 to get my first, a 1 to get my second, and so on, I'm going to plug in 99 to get my 100th term. So I'll take y equals 5 times 99 plus 2, and that gives you 497. So that gives you your last term. So now you need to plug it into the formula. So you take your first number, so 2, plus your last number, which is 497, divided by 2, and times by 10. So make sure when you type it into your calculator, can you see that? Kind of. Okay, do not type it in like this. 4 plus 497 divided by 2. If you type it in like that, and then times 10. No, times 100, I think. I put 10, but I meant to put 100. Okay, if you type it in like this, you get 24,852. So what's happening is it is doing your order of operations. So it's doing this 497 divided by 2 times 100 first, and then it's adding 2 to it. So make sure you put parentheses and do 2 plus 497 end parentheses divided by 2 and then times 100. Oh my gosh, that was a heck of a lot closer than it should have been. That's crazy to me. Okay, anyways, so your answer is 24,950. So 24,950. So make sure you put parentheses around that. Okay, last one. So for 70 terms, okay, so we have 400 is our first, and it looks like we are going, no, this time we are going down by 10 every time. Okay, so it's still linear. So now instead of adding, we are just subtracting. Worry. All right, so we need to write our y equals. So y equals, we're going down by 10, so negative 10x, and we started at 400. We are trying to find our 70th term. So I'm not going to make my table based on the last two examples. When I plug in, if I plug in 50 here, that would give me my 51st term. So if I want my 70th term, I plug in one less than that. So negative 10 times 69 plus 400. So if I plug that in, I get negative 290, which makes sense. If this is going down every time, you can have negative numbers. That's perfectly fine. Okay, so now we need to take our first number, so 400 plus our second number, so plus a negative 290, or you can just do minus 290, divided by 2 times your number of numbers, so times 70. Make sure you put that in parentheses, and you get 400 minus 290, oops, divided by 2 times 70. You should get 3,850. So if you add all of those numbers together, that is what you get. Oops. And that's all for arithmetic, sequence, and series.